Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Justice and Pieces guest speaker series. As we've been interviewing lawyer and paralegal bencher candidates, as always, the views and opinions are of the candidates alone. They don't reflect me, Justice and Pieces, Charles College, or any other education institution or organization that I'm affiliated with. Continuing our series, we have David joining us this morning. First of all, David, thanks for taking the time to speak with me. And perhaps we can get started. You can tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, JP. Thank you for having me. My name is David Milosevic. I am entering my 19th year of practice now. I started off, I articled at what is now Norton Rose. I was really interested in tax law. It seemed like a big intellectual mountain to climb. So I got into tax law. I didn't get an offer back in tax. So I decided to leave and travel the world for a while. I did that for about a year and a half. I was in Nepal, I was in India, I was all kinds of places, trying to decide what to do with myself. And I decided to come back to Ontario. I had a law degree here, and I said, maybe I can use that law degree to help people. And I said, I'm going to take legal aid files and try to help the public doing legal aid. And I came back and I couldn't get a legal aid file for the life of me. But through the lawyer referral service at the Law Society, I was referred a really large securities litigation file. And thank God I had that file for about 8 years, and I kind of built the foundation of my current office off of getting that file. It took me through some lean periods early on. Now I have a 5-lawyer commercial litigation boutique. We do a lot of fraud work. That happens to be the central area of my practice. So a lot of Mareva injunctions, complex commercial frauds. We represent groups of investors who've been defrauded in investment schemes. So that is a large part of my work now. I spent a long time at Pro Bono Ontario as actually their leading volunteer in the province for 10 years. I did one shift every week, every Thursday morning. I was at Law Help Ontario for 10 years. I served thousands of people through there. So I really got a really good sense of what types of access to justice issues are really facing the public that can't afford to retain counsel. Over the past few years, as my office has gotten on firmer foundations, I've shifted to becoming more involved in the profession. I was on OBA Civil Litigation Committee for a few years, Advocate Society Standing Committee for a few years. I ran for bencher in 2019, first time out. I was motivated at that time to run, given what was happening to Pro Bono Ontario, the lack of funding, the fact that the centers were going to close. And so that motivated my first run, and I got some experience in the issues facing the Law Society. And after that run, I became definitely interested in how our regulator works, the importance of contributing to the regulator. And so now I'm running a second time this year.
Perfect. So you had that experience there from last time, and now you're running again. So why come give it another shot? What, in terms of, obviously, I guess you're hoping for a different result, but why give it another chance? And tell me a little bit more about why you're running now.
Sure. Of course, yeah, I'm hoping for a different result. I don't recall offhand. I came in 40 something, I think, last time. And as we know, the slate took a large number of the positions. The full stop or stop at the time slate took quite a number of the positions in Toronto and elsewhere. I'm running again because the first time I ran, I just became interested. I became more aware, more educated of the issues that our regulator actually does address the breadth of the issues that the regulator addresses, how important they are to the profession. And frankly, you and I are having this conversation and we're aware of these issues, but before I ran, I can't say I was particularly aware of a lot of the issues that the regulator is involved in. I knew I paid my fees. The regulators seemed a little bit distant from my everyday practice, apart from, getting audited early on when they do the audit program. But now that I know more, I want to be involved more. I want to contribute. I value our profession greatly. I love lawyers. I love going to lawyer events. I love talking to my colleagues. I think that by working together and really having that attitude of working together, we can accomplish a lot together. And we have such huge challenges facing us now, unlike ever before. And you hear that a lot, but we really do. Of course, we've got the political kind of conflict that's entering the doors of the regulator, which is really problematic. And I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit more. But we have the perennial articling challenge. We'll talk about that as well. And now AI hitting us like a tidal wave, and how that's going to change practice. So all these issues have motivated me to run again.
Now, I guess before we get into those issues, I mean, the sort of elephant in the room there, as you kind of touched on, is in the last election you had the Stop group. This time you have Full Stop, and you also have the Good Governance Coalition, and you know, whether you want to call it a slate or a coalition or a faction, whatever the terminology, team, they're dominating essentially this election cycle. Akin to like a liberal NDP conservative type of political election. Now, what are your thoughts, first of all, just on slates and coalitions generally? And then in terms of as a candidate here, an unaffiliated candidate, how has that impacted your message in this upcoming election?
Well, my thoughts on it, I'll take the words of a couple of great fellow candidates of mine. I was watching your interviews with Rebecca Durkin. And as you know, Rebecca, highly qualified. She's got my vote for bencher. Her practice is focused on professional regulators, very qualified in this area. And what did she say about the slate system? She's running for the Good Governance Coalition. She called it a sign of dysfunction in our law society, not once, but a dozen times during that interview with you. Quinn Ross as well has called the slate system a sign of dysfunction, another great candidate. It's deeply disturbing that we have a slate system that's emerged. We're politicizing the regulator, and we can talk about it more, the reasons, whether it's a necessary evil. I think Quinn is the one who called it a necessary evil. I don't agree that it's necessary. I might agree that it's an evil. So I'm deeply disturbed by it. And my campaign, right from the beginning, when I saw the emergence of the slate system, this became the most important issue for me in this election. It's the one issue under which all the other issues will be subsumed, and how we run the regulator. So just as an intro to the topic, and hopefully we can talk more about it, I would say my attitude toward it is one of deep concern.
All right, so let's go more into that. As you've pointed out, everything else kind of gets subsumed because everything that will play out accordingly to how the vote goes based on the respective groups, right? So maybe you can kind of elaborate on not necessarily a necessary evil as you pointed out, but perhaps an evil. What can be done differently? I guess maybe that's sort of looking forward. I know at least the Good Governance Coalition members that I've spoke to are saying one of the only things that they really pledged together is that if they're elected, they're going to look at electoral reform. And I mean, then it kind of goes into the whole, we're running as a slate to stop the other slate, and if we're elected, then we're going to potentially do away with slates. But all of that kind of looks at maybe the broader question of how should we be electing our benchers?
Well, we should be electing benchers based on individual qualifications for the role, based on the character, the ideas, the contribution that the individuals want to make. We should not be electing based on slates. I appreciate that the Good Governance Coalition wants to study the issue with an eye toward eliminating slates in the future. That's a great intention, but we know how the road is paved with good intentions. And if we have 40 people from a similar slate, again, great candidates individually, but the pernicious aspect is in the slate, not in the individuals. It's in the organizational system. And if we have 40 individuals who came in from one slate, they've been commonly funded, common branding, they have a number of common positions, one of which is not to bring back the statement of principles. If we have 40 people come in there This goes to a committee to study the issue. How likely is it that 4 years from now, the slate system will have been eliminated? Is it more likely that it's eliminated or more likely that it's become entrenched? And if it is entrenched, how will that then affect polarization by those members of the profession who aren't in line with the slate? It's going to create even more polarization. So what we've seen in society generally, as we look around past 10 years, especially past 5, society is accelerating in so many areas, right? AI really hit all our consciousness a few months ago, and it's been fast. Things change fast these days. And what we've seen is that the society that we look at is incredibly polarized. We've imported some of that from the US, which is increasingly polarized. We're seeing that in our politics. And now, as I say, we have it entering the doors of convocation. Very dangerous trend. I'm running because I want to stand against that trend. Frankly, JP, I think I'm standing in the face of a tsunami, and it is a valiant but ultimately fruitless effort to do so. But someone has to do it, because as time goes on, the voices that are there, and there are many, who say that independence is crucial, will, with all due respect and modesty, turn out to have been the correct voices. We're going to regret going down this path. And so at least I'm standing up to say, let's be very careful. And you never know with elections. Issues have a way of congealing and galvanizing people. Hopefully the issue of independence, of preventing politicization of our regulator with all the risks that entails, hopefully that will resonate with the voters and we will prevent that from happening.
So I guess maybe the last thing here on this point, because I know you want to talk about AI and some of the other issues there, but no, especially when you look at some of the costs there, I know like mail outs and things like that. I mean, if candidates get together and maybe in the past informally, or they say, hey, vote for David and JP together, and here are the things that we're sort of on board with, and it cuts costs. And I mean, even that, the fact that, I think it's like $30,000 to mail all this stuff out, postcards to all the different lawyers there. I mean, there's no rules about some of these things, right? So is it kind of now, because it's gotten to the point where you have 40 and 45 and 35 sized groups, that it's a much more than a few people pooling resources, rather it is getting into a full-fledged sort of battle on the fronts, whether the fronts being Twitter or in our materials that we get between the different parties, and who's to say, again, as if it works for whoever gets elected, if one slate or the coalition get sort of almost unanimously in power, right, then people are going to say, well, hey, it worked in 2019, it worked in 2023, let's get together and now we're going to call our pink party group of all of us that are going to run the next time, so we don't suffer the same fate individually. So I mean, what are your thoughts kind of on some of those points about the lack of maybe rules on spending and the fairness that creates to a sole practitioner that wants to run but doesn't have a $50,000 budget to compete?
Well, that raises a host of issues there, JP. So on the cost is exorbitant, and most individuals wouldn't be able to afford that kind of cost to really get their name out there. So that points right away, it highlights an issue that we need to be concerned about in really putting maybe more detail into how these elections are run. We don't have a lot of detail on the process. We have the voting process, the days, qualifications of benchers, but we don't have a lot, for example, on a major issue, campaign funding. Where do the funds come from? When you press that that donate button and click on that on the website, where do those funds go? Is there a limit? Who has a voice in that? Who distributes them? How? We don't know. On the issue that you raised, well, before, let's say a few people pool their resources and they send out mailings together. That's not so much of a problem, because what are they saying? They're saying, I'm an individual, here are my qualifications, vote for me as an individual. They're not promoting themselves as a party, they're sharing costs. When you have an organized slate where the message is vote for all 40 of us. We need to control convocation. Now you're dealing with more of a party, slate, a party. That starts becoming the real issue. Now, in this election, the argument was raised, well, look, that was done in 2019 by one group, and this is the quote unquote necessary evil that we need to undertake this time to prevent that from happening again. And needs to be prevented for a variety of reasons. One of the main reasons we've been told is the interruption at convocation, the inability to get business done, the assault on decorum. And that's not frivolous. I don't say that frivolously. An assault on decorum is an assault on the legislative function or the board function. But to all those arguments, I say, is the threat, is it really a necessary evil? Is the threat still there? That group formed, coalesced around opposition to a statement of principles. And did they win simply because they were a group? Or did they win as a group because they opposed something that the majority of the bar, rightfully or wrongfully, opposed? That issue galvanized the voters last time. That issue is gone. We've had 4 years of watching certain members of that slate, and there are great members of that slate too, principled people. We don't need to vilify anybody. Take people on their own terms. So they're principled people on that side. We had some people who might not have observed the rules of decorum, the bylaws of the Law Society properly. Well, if they didn't, by filing motions that they shouldn't have or engaging in maybe some intemperate activity that they shouldn't have, is the solution to run a slate against them? Or is the solution to use the bylaws, to use the rules of professional conduct and police the conduct of those members appropriately? Why was that not done more? So this necessary evil that we're being told about, I don't agree that this cure is not worse than the disease.
I know I just said that would be the last one, but in just response to what you brought up there, I mean, because the Good Governance Coalition, I think, as you brought up the necessary evil, or the only thing worse than two slates is one slate, right? And if the group was going to go run again, I mean, they are running again, but if there wasn't a coalition, then there would be a risk, again, the same thing happening again as part of that. And again, maybe the second piece to this question then is they've pledged again to look at electoral reform afterwards. And if, and again, that does certainly require a leap of faith that, as you pointed out before, that once you're in and you're in committees and then these are the people that you've been campaigning with and you saw how effective it was, whether or not it's going to bring a change is a different story. But I mean, is there any merit to any of that in terms of, well, if they didn't have a coalition, then it'd still be the full stop team and 2019 would repeat all over again?
That is a risk. But my response to that is that the energy to the issues that motivated full stop, I think, has waned significantly. I don't think that side of the argument has as much resonance with the bar as it once did, nor, frankly, due to the behavior of some individuals, is there as much of a willingness to give that full slate the benefit of the doubt. We've seen that maybe some aspects of regulation that we want advanced are not going to be advanced if that slate wins. We should run against individuals and not groups. And at the end of the day, JP, let's say that people in the slate get in. There are other mechanisms that we can use to address misbehavior, interruption of convocation, and take those steps as opposed to running a slate and by our own behavior guaranteeing that we entrench a party system. And this argues, at the end of the day, conveniently perhaps for my campaign, this argues in favor of the bar hopefully being more educated and electing independents. It's only by having independents such as myself, other independents who are running, people who have the real incentive to jump on that committee and make sure those reforms are undertaken to eliminate this threat for the future. Because this threat of a politicized convocation, let's say next time full stop, gets galvanized by the wind of good governance. And we have a conservative so-called slate running the Law Society. We get a provincial government that's liberal. They start looking at convocation saying, why do we have these people who are opposed to our goals, our general goals, now running the Law Society? Maybe we should step in and have government legislate. This idea of self-regulation now is starting to become too much of a problem. We create a real problem for ourselves down the line. And what of the public? The public who looks around and now suddenly the convocation is run by a very liberal faction, and members of the public say, this doesn't represent me. I want my lawyer to speak for me, but they seem to be politically aligned. I don't trust the people who govern them. Politics does not belong in convocation, and those with responsible leadership need to look forward to that. I understand those who say they're responsible now are doing the responsible thing by eliminating a threat. But is it going to create a worse situation? I am convinced beyond doubt that it will.
All right, Nate, David. So now I want to be able to switch gears. You brought up AI.
Right.
What are some of the issues there that are important to you besides the coalition and full stop teams? And what role do you see the Law Society having in dealing with some of these issues?
Sure. So we have a large regulator, as you know, JP. What is it, $118 million now, 550 employees. You know the stats, very large regulator. We deal with a lot of very important issues: regulation, enforcement, licensing. Under each one of those general rubrics, there are multiple programs and issues that we need to deal with. I think the licensing issue, it's been coming up over and over and over again. It's been many years. We do have, people are getting bored of hearing about it, but we have the crisis with articling. I think the stats I saw that are by 2025, we'll have 29,000 law graduates coming every year, and we're going to have 11,000 licensing places, articling places. These are qualified people who've put in the time to go to law school, dedicated students who are going to reach this bottleneck of being able to enter the profession. We have to do something about it. There's a concern of creating two-tiered systems, having the law placement program, having a two-tiered articling system where some people are seen as better or worse than others. I think for now it's a practical reality. We need to have multiple streams for people to enter the profession. I've hired at my office 2 LPP students. I've been thrilled with them. So the profession needs to get a little bit more educated about the availability of these types of students. And I think slowly, as time goes on, I wouldn't say it's quite a stigma, but we're lawyers, we're status conscious. We do prefer people who've gone a traditional route. I think as the years go on, as time goes on, these alternative streams, as long as the Law Society gets behind them, they're well accredited. I think these alternative streams will begin to gain acceptance in the profession and begin to provide more opportunity for all the students to enter licensing properly.
Yeah, so let's follow up on that, because there's been certainly lots of talk over the years. Even when I was articling like 15 years ago, or not even like 10 years ago, that it creates these 2 tiers, and now with mandatory minimum wage being rolled out after a lot of debate around that perhaps that leads to even further loss of opportunities, because some firms might say, well, okay, before, when it was unpaid, or maybe it was a stipend or something, we could afford that. There's all the increased costs, inflation, et cetera. We're not going to take a student this time around. So what can be done, or what can the Law Society be doing in response to some of that? As you mentioned, maybe highlighting the other programs like the LPP, but what more can be done for articling students and newly licensed lawyers and paralegals about gaining from that experience? Because again, the other thing is there's some inconsistencies, right? It's not the same as maybe the tax law experience you may have gotten years ago compared to some other places. Just the work that's being done just isn't the same, and you don't necessarily want to speak up, because then you may have to find another position, and back to the drawing board. So, I mean, what else can the Law Society be doing with respect to articling?
It's difficult. There's never going to be entirely consistency in the experience that students get articling. It's an apprenticeship profession still. And some people are going to apprentice at a large firm, others will be with a sole practitioner. And it's impossible to say which experience necessarily will be better. Um, so students are going to have inevitably a range of experiences articling. The issue with the minimum wage, that was a bit of a challenging one. Because you get the standard Milton Friedman type argument that, well, if you legislate a minimum wage in any way, you prevent people from entering a labor force that otherwise would have entered it because you've set the ceiling too high. And now you have people who might not be able to afford an articling student who could have given them training opportunities. I'm not so sure. I know that when I was starting and I had my first articling student, I paid my articling student good salary, kind of a standard salary for a small firm, and I waited till I could afford one. I had one, and I thought that was the fair thing to do. When you really need an articling student, you're going to find the opportunity to pay them. There might be around the edges some people who are left out, but we have really so little data on any of these things, JP. And I think what I took from Quinn's interview, the importance of getting data on some of these things. I think the Law Society needs to collect more data on these issues. How many people are being excluded? If it is a large number, we have to change maybe our approach to how we're going to get placements. Maybe we should reconsider there, as you probably know, in the minimum wage aspect of the articling program, there are exemptions. Maybe we should broaden the exemptions for certain practitioners who want to take on articling students. Maybe those exemptions should apply for legal clinics. So maybe an exemption system, but we need the data to know how many people are being left out and what can be done to incorporate them. But the alternative streams of licensing, I think, are the key issue that the Law Society needs to get behind, expand those, reinforce those, and make sure that those are more acceptable among the profession.
Now, David, is there anything else there that you want to highlight or talk more of here relating to your candidacy for bencher in terms of that the viewers and listeners want to know more about?
Sure. I think like any political campaign, at the end of the day, JP, there are certain voters who are single issue voters. They want to know your take on one single issue, and that's going to sway their vote one way or another. And certainly we have those in our election. For the Trial Lawyers Association, I know that for them, the issue of outside ownership of law firms, that's going to be an issue that swings them strongly one way or another. For a lot of our voters, the issue of whether we support local libraries is going to be a big issue. But generally, for most voters, I think what they're voting on is disposition and character of the people that they vote for. Who are they voting for? What's the character of this person? And what I see myself bringing to this situation, it's the same thing that I bring to the litigation files that I deal with. I bring a balance of temperament. To me, there's no automatically right or wrong person. I don't think anyone based on character is a good or bad person for what they advocate for. I believe that most people are advocating for things that they truly believe are good. I may believe they're incorrect and want to discuss that with them, but I don't start from the position of maligning anyone. Everyone has good reasons for what they believe, certainly among our colleagues, professionals who are committed their lives to what they're doing. They have good reasons for believing these things. And I want to know, I want to discuss. I don't make any prejudgments. The only prejudgments I make are we need to fulfill our responsibilities under the Law Society Act. We have to be guided by making sure that the profession is well regarded in the eyes of the public, that it can be trusted, that we're focusing on protecting the public. We're focusing on enhancing access to justice. And we do all this collectively. And so by voting for me, I think voters are voting for someone with the temperament of working with anyone. It doesn't matter to me how difficult a colleague might be about something. It doesn't provoke in me a response of fighting fire with fire. It provokes in me a response of, I will talk to you about it. I will hear you out, and I will assume your motives are good. Now we're going to talk. And at the end of the day, it's going to come down to a vote. And we're each independently going to vote for something. And that vote is going to carry the day. But I want to work constructively with my colleagues. I want to depoliticize the Law Society. I want to take us forward because, as I said at the beginning, JP, the challenges that we are going to face over the next 4 years, 8 years, the profession is going to be transformed. And unless we're doing that together, collectively, it's the old expression, stand together or hang separately. It's not going to be good for the future. We need people who will work together constructively.
Now, speaking of the future, David, certainly there's a lot of students, hopefully students of mine that are listening. And as these future lawyers and paralegals come into our profession, do you have any advice or any words of wisdom for them?
Many, but focus more than anything else on your professional ethics. Your ethics are your foundation. If you're practicing ethically, and with that, with dedication, take your profession seriously, put in the effort to get as good as you can at what you're doing. Be a professional. And if you're ethical and you're professional, there's no limit on where your career can go. You don't necessarily need to plan every step. I know I couldn't. And where I've ended up, I couldn't have really predicted. But I focused on making sure that I was ethical in everything I did. Doesn't mean you're not tough. Doesn't mean you're not firm. Doesn't mean you're not a strong lawyer. But it means you're guided by that principle. You will not lose track. Ethics, and then enjoy it. Focus hard, study hard, develop an expertise in something that you enjoy. And what that is, you won't be able to tell. Mine was tax law originally. And now I do commercial frauds, and I love the work that I do. It'll change, especially early on, because you don't know the lay of the land. You don't know where the profession can go. And so as you begin to learn, you'll find that some things that you'll stay up at night for certain files, it doesn't matter. You just want to know. Other files are just difficult to even open the file. And so follow your instincts on what you're enjoying, and that energy will take you through.
Perfect. So the final question there, as you may know from watching the other interviews, is the lawyers that are listening and have up to 40 votes. And I know we've been talking about this throughout, but in exercising their vote, and first of all, hopefully everyone listening is voting. It's a couple of weeks away now, but why should they vote for you, David?
Hopefully they'll vote for me because they think that I'm a person who can bring an independent voice to convocation at a time that an independent voice is crucial. We need at least a few people, such as myself, who are going to push on this issue of making sure that slates are eliminated in future elections, that we reform the Law Society before others have to step in and reform us. And the dangers that are posed to self-regulation through this politicization of the regulator are going to be ones that we look back and we say, we could have done something and we didn't. And once it slips out of our hands, we've gotten so used to it, but once it slips out of our hands, it will be gone. And elect some independents such as myself, people who can work well with both sides of what is certain to be a fractured convocation, and slowly work toward bringing us together and eliminating this threat for the future. So that's why they should vote for me as well as other independents.
Thanks once again, David, for taking the time to talk with me here today. And thanks for everyone for tuning in. Take care as always.
Thank you, JP. Thank you.